for joining today. Hopefully everyone is here for the webinar on the Working Lands Impact Grants, which is the Supply Chain Impact Grant and the ARPA Primary Producer Impact Grant. And my name is Claire Salerno. I'm the program coordinator for the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative at the Agency of Agriculture. And I'm joined today by Diana Ferguson, who does grants management administrative support. She might be popping in and out of today's meeting, so it'll mostly be me. And then some of you may also know our program lead, Elizabeth Sipple, who's not here today. So I'll be your main sort of point of contact for grants moving forward and can route you to those two folks as needed. So I'll provide a short overview of the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. And I think most folks are muted, but if you are able to mute when not speaking, that's great, just to reduce background noise. You can use the raise hand function to ask a question. You can also put a question in the chat. I think maybe we'll aim to sort of go through everything and save time at the end for questions, and then I'll definitely be available if anyone wants to set up an individual call or anything with me. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, and thank you for joining us today. And again, this is recorded, and I'll also be posting the slides that I'm sharing on our website, so you can refer back to them at any time. So for folks that aren't familiar, the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative is a Vermont state program that was created in 2012. It's a fund that manages and invests about $1 million annually into agricultural and forestry-based businesses. To date, since the program was created, there's been about $16 million awarded, and this year, which is fiscal year 2024, there are $3 million available to award. So the main folks that this program is for are farm, food, and forest businesses in Vermont. The program is jointly administered through 3 state agencies, which is the Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. We have kind of guidance from a governing board, which is made up of members who represent all the different sort of farm and food and forest sectors in Vermont, as well as specific seats for business assistance organizations like the Vermont Agricultural Assistance Corporation, the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And all of the grant and contract applications are reviewed and awarded through a competitive review process, which is guided by a whole group of industry, nonprofit, and government stakeholders. So these are the grant opportunities that are available for fiscal year 2024. And the state fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. So right now we're about halfway through state fiscal year 2024. And that means we need to award all of these grants before the end of June of 2024, and ideally before the end of May. So you're probably here today for the Supply Chain and ARPA Primary Producer Impact Grant. There's a couple other smaller grants that are open now or soon. There's information available on our website about those, and there may be or maybe already has been some webinars specifically for those other opportunities. So these two grants, I'm going to call the one ARPA for short, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, which some of you might know was like federal legislation passed during COVID to help businesses and the economy recover. And then the Supply Chain Impact Grant is the other grant that's being offered. We don't normally have both of these grants at the same time. So some things are the same for them, and then there are some distinctions between them, mostly because the ARPA grant is federal dollars that came with very specific sort of guidelines from the federal government, because it's technically COVID relief money. So that's why we're running both of them at the same time. There are a lot of similarities, mostly being the timeline, generally the types of eligible projects, and then the award size. And then I'll also talk about the differences between the two of them. But the timeline for both grants is exactly the same. So many of you may know that on Friday, we released and opened the pre-application, since this is a two-phase application process. Today is our webinar that we're doing. The pre-application closes on January 19th at 11:59 p.m. And in mid-February, folks that applied that do the sort of pre-application process will be notified, and certain folks will be invited to submit a final round application, which will be due at the end of March, on March 25th. And folks that submit a final application will be notified in early May. They'll have through that month to submit the documentation with an estimated project start date of early June, which means that projects would then wrap up in June 2026, because these are roughly 2-year grants. So the general eligibility, broadly speaking, is the same for both grants, and then I'll get into some of the differences. So all organizations or businesses that apply must be based in Vermont. These grants are open to any type of business structure, whether that's a sole proprietorship, co-op, LLC, whatever it may be. Anyone that applies must be in compliance with all state regulations and in good standing. So specifically, that means that there's not any outstanding enforcement going on with water quality, taxes, other state departments. If any of you are previous recipients of a Working Lands Business Enhancement Grant, which used to be called the Standard Business Grant, or if you received the COVID-19 Response Business Development Grant, you're welcome to reapply this year, regardless of what year you received that grant. And certainly anyone that has applied but not been awarded a grant is welcome to reapply. Anyone that maybe has received some of our larger dollar grants, so the Supply Chain Impact Grant when it was offered before, last year when the ARPA Primary Producer Grant was offered, or 2 years ago, there was a Special Meat Slaughter and Processing Development Grant. If you received one of those in the last 3 years, you would not be eligible to apply and receive this grant. And if that is you and you have questions about that, let me know. So there is some more specific eligibility, specifically for the ARPA Primary Producer Impact Grant. And again, this is because this grant comes from special federal COVID relief dollars that was really specifically targeted for what they're calling primary producers. So that for us is farms, and then on the forest side would only include loggers. And then maple sugaring is also included. So any raising livestock, any growing crops, maple sugaring, harvesting timber or logging would count. If you're on the forest side and you do sawmill, you do firewood, but you're not logging, you are not eligible for this grant. As part of this grant, you will need to demonstrate negative economic impact due to COVID-19. This is very broad. You basically will write a paragraph about the negative economic harm or impact that you had with the pandemic. It does not need to be a sustained negative impact. So basically everyone would fall into this category because almost everybody had some kind of negative impact. And technically the grant funds must be used to support recovery from economic harm experienced. Again, this can be like pretty broad. So it's all very qualitative. There's no need to submit like statements demonstrating that you lost profit or lost anything specific. And I'm happy to talk through any questions about that if you have any. And then if anyone here or watching this happened to receive the Vermont COVID-19 Agricultural Assistance Program grant that was run right at the beginning of the pandemic, you can apply for this grant and receive it, but you just will have to use it for something different than what you received that grant for. And if you're not sure if you received that grant or not, you can let me know. So some of the more specific eligibility pieces for the Supply Chain Impact Grant. So this does not have to be specifically for primary producers. It can be, so any farm could choose to apply for this one instead of the other one, and I'd be happy to talk through why you might choose one over the other. But it could also include anyone that's doing only processing of farm or forest products, so any sawmills, firewood processors, pellet mill, that type of thing, or anyone like that is doing like grocery stores, food hubs, those types of kind of other sectors of the ag economy. But the important thing is that there's still, if you're not kind of growing product yourself or harvesting product yourself, that you still have a connection to Vermont's working landscape, so that you would be sourcing at least half of your raw ingredients from Vermont farms or Vermont forests. Or if you're not doing that, that the purpose of the grant would be to significantly increase the use of Vermont products. So for any value-added food business, that means that if you're in the sort of category of unique food products, you're generally not going to be eligible unless you're using the grant funds to increase production of raw ingredients in Vermont. So mostly this applies to like folks that are like in the coffee, chocolate, all that space. We love those products. I think it's great that there are Vermont companies in that space, but because those are products that are not produced in Vermont and cannot be produced in Vermont, there's not that working lands connection and they're not eligible for this grant. And then on the forestry side, so anyone that's in sawmill, firewood, pellets, wood manufacturing, we know that the sort of forest wood basket, as they call it, is a little broader and more regional than the food system might be. So the focus is more on that you should be using at least half of your raw material should be coming from the Northeast. Or if that's not the case, that the working lands grant is specifically around increasing your use of Northeast or ideally Vermont grown wood. And again, happy to talk through any specific questions about that with anyone in another call. Great. So back to the similarities between both the grants. They can both cover the same general type of work, which is any kind of marketing or market development activities, research and development activities. Probably the most common one we see is infrastructure. So that would include any construction, project-specific planning or permitting, equipment costs, supplies, and that can include labor to do those activities. It can also include almost any type of energy efficiency enhancements. So if you're looking to like upgrade equipment to something more efficient, installing, other types of electrical systems, three-phase power, solar, that type of thing. And then the last main category is workforce training and development. So that could include some specific like technical skill training for you or your staff, business management training, or business succession planning, if you're looking to do a generational transfer. And so again, these could apply for either grant, could cover these activities. So any of those activities could qualify for either the ARPA grant or the Supply Chain Impact Grant. The important thing is that with the Supply Chain Impact Grant, any of those activities that you're doing should have what we're calling a supply chain or market level impact on the respective sector that you're working in. So that could look like making really significant process or infrastructure improvements for medium to large scale production, sort of increasing producer processing, or increasing distribution of primary ag and forest products. It could be that you're really like increasing the scale of a specific product that's going into the supply chain that's going to strengthen the industry overall, or there's a new sort of technology or approach that you're looking at that could lead to new opportunities for multiple businesses. So those are kind of the general like ideas of what supply chain impact can look like. I'm happy to talk through anything specific with all of you. This will be something that you just described like in words, a few sentences or a paragraph in the application. There's not specific like exact quantitative metrics to meet. On our website, we do have a blog with examples of past projects, including past supply chain impact grants. I'd be happy to send those to anybody if you're looking for examples of sort of what the level of supply chain impact has looked like for past projects. You can also access that blog from the Working Lands homepage. It's on one of the tabs on the right side of the page. So moving to the grant amount and the matching funds. And right now I'm going to talk about mostly the similarities in both these grants because they're quite similar. So with these grants, you can request anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000 I don't think it's necessarily more competitive or less competitive to request more or less. The important thing is to do what's appropriate for your project. The sort of default way these grants are structured is that it is a matching grant. So there are shared costs that your business or organization would take on, and those matching funds should be equal to 100% of the grant request. So if you decide to apply for a $100,000 grant, you should be prepared to match with $100,000 through a combination of cash or cash and in-kind sources. So cash sources can be funds in the bank, other grants, loans, or your labor toward the project. For our purposes, we consider your labor cash. I know that's a little unusual in that it's usually in kind. Happy to answer questions about that if you have any. So in kind sources would really be if someone's donating supplies for you to use, or their services, like you're getting pro bono work, or if you have actual volunteers doing the labor. And if you are really need this grant, it's like really needed for the next stage of your business, but you're not able to provide any match, or you can't provide the full match, you can still apply. And almost all of the application would be the same as if you had the full match. In the budget table, you just wouldn't include any match, or you would include only the amount that you can realistically commit. And then there's an option for you to explain why the match waiver is needed at this time. And for those folks that might be in that situation, I'm happy to talk with you one-on-one about that. So because this is a two-phase application process, and we know that prices are volatile right now, we do ask that, especially if you're requesting funds for equipment, or really almost anything that you can get a cost estimate for, it's really important to do your research and base your grant requests and match amounts on sort of current reasonable costs for those amounts, but knowing that if you end up being awarded this grant and you won't start work until June, that the price of things, especially equipment and contractual work, can change in that time. There is an option that if you are invited back to the final application, which again you'd submit in late March, that if you can submit some updated quotes or cost estimates showing that the price has changed for the items you're looking for grant funds for, you can change what your overall grant request or matching amount or both is based on those price changes. You can't change the request because at that time because you decide you want to do something else, or like you change your mind about something, but if the price has, gone up, as we know, things are changing a lot, then that would be allowed. And so for the supply chain impact grant, there is up to $786,000 available to award. And for the ARPA primary producer grant, there is up to $913,000 available. It's really hard to say how competitive these grants will be. It's great that this year we're able to offer both of them. There are also significant funds for some other separate grant opportunities through the Agency of Agriculture this year that folks might be applying to, and we also don't know if folks are going to be applying for $50,000 or $250,000 or somewhere in between. So I know that's a question I get a lot, so I don't have an answer on how competitive it might be, but happy to try to chat more with folks about that if I can. So the pre-application, which maybe we should just call it like first round application, because it is, you have to fill it out online. So for both grants, it looks pretty similar. This is a document that is online. It's your sort of main go-to document for applying for any of our grants. You'll see it kind of linked on the grant page, and it provides key dates for the grant that I went over, program information, applicant eligibility, project eligibility. It has the whole application, all the questions that you'll have to answer. It has information about grant reporting requirements if you were to be awarded, what that would look like. And then it also has, and this is key, information about the scoring criteria. So we'll talk a little bit about all of these things. So the pre-application online has 4 main sections. The first is information about your business and organization. It's fairly basic information. You'll see that some of it is optional. We use the same information form for all of our grants, so not all of it applies to everybody, and you can skip those questions that don't apply to you. You'd provide an overview of your project, what you want to do, like the basic details about what the kind of goals are and how it's going to help your business at this time. There'll be a budget that you'll fill out with a narrative. So that's where you'll say, I'm requesting $100,000 and this much is for labor, this much is for equipment. This is how much match I'm putting in and in this category. And then it'll probably be applicable for almost everyone to upload quotes or cost estimates. And then there is an optional section where you can upload letters of support or additional attachments. So I think the letters of support, they're optional. They're definitely highly encouraged. You will also have the option to upload additional ones in the final round if you move to that stage. I think especially for any folks looking to apply to the Supply Chain Impact Grant, especially if your project is about working with other businesses, or almost all those projects will be about impacting other businesses, having letters from whoever those other folks are can be really helpful and help illustrate the impact of the project, especially if you're a business that isn't directly producing forest or ag products, but maybe you're working with farms. So kind of really to demonstrate that impact to the working landscape is important. Yeah, so those are the main sections. The reason we do the pre-application and the final round application is to try to keep this pre-application a little more straightforward, not have everyone do all the details about like your business financials and your business plan and all of the like specific timeline, unless you've been invited to the final round. That's the pieces you'll add on. We want to keep this more high level so that the board can understand sort of the overall concept, what the potential impact might be, and then not make everybody go through a sort of more intense application process. Yeah, so documents required in the pre-application for both of the grants, as I mentioned, would be quotes or cost estimates. Again, this would mostly just be for the bigger amount. So if there's smaller elements in there, you wouldn't need to include those. And then I mentioned the optional but recommended letters of support. And then if there are like additional information, project plans, random kind of other things about your business that you would like to upload, you're welcome to do so. And then you can update any of those or add additional ones during the final application if you move to that phase. So the specific documents required in the sort of business information section of the ARPA Primary Producer Grant, there's a few documents that are needed to prove that you are in fact a primary producer of agri-forest products. So again, that would be growing crops, raising livestock, tapping trees, or logging. So for folks that farm, hopefully you file Schedule F and you can submit your Schedule F from 2021. Or if you don't farm but have a profit and loss statement from 2021 that demonstrates income from those primary production activities, so especially if you're logging or sugar making, that's what you would submit. And then there are some additional optional documents that you can also submit to further demonstrate that you are a primary producer. And I'm happy to answer questions about that if needed. And then because this is specifically a COVID recovery grant, it is only for businesses that have been in operation since before January 2020. So you would need to submit a tax return from 2019. You can black out any private information there, just proving that you were in fact operating in 2019. And then, as I mentioned before, a narrative description of what the negative impact of COVID was on your business. So the scoring is fairly similar for both grants, and I'm now realizing that I think there is a slight difference for the Supply Chain Impact Grant that I didn't add up here. So there's a few different sections that we would go through. Yeah, I'm realizing I think that this is not the updated scoring, so I'm sorry about that, but it is available in the request for applications, and I will make sure to update it in the slides before I post these online. So I believe the main sections for the pre-application are the project impact, the quality of concept, the demonstrated project need, and the budget. And I believe they're fairly equally weighted. You wouldn't have information about business viability and financial management at this time, nor about the goals and outcomes, nor about the engagement, equity, and equality. So it's those four sections. So I would encourage you to look specifically in the RFA of the grant you want to apply to and check out that scoring criteria and make sure it's something you're thinking about as you fill out the application, because those are the main pieces that the reviewers will be looking at. So if you do advance to the final round, just want to give you a sort of heads up of what might be then coming your way, because then there's a little more documentation required. You would have to do a short attestation that you're in compliance with all of Vermont's water quality regulations, and then the bigger pieces are that you would need certain business financial statements that are listed here, and there'll be more details about what those will look like if and as you move to the final round. And then likely the cutoff will be if you're requesting more than 75,000, you would also need to submit your business plan. So if any of these items are things you really don't have, might be worth starting to think about, but again, they're not going to be required in this initial phase. And again, you'll have the option to, in the final round, upload additional letters of support or any other documentation that you want to add. For folks that end up being awarded these grants, you will need to, at that time, submit a current W-9 form, a certificate of insurance, and then from there we'll do an e-signed and fully executed grant agreement. And so you'll need that in hand before you begin the work or incur expenses. And we provide a lot of information about this to folks that do get awarded. But yeah, just want to have that information as a heads up. And yeah, so we're going to move. I know I've kind of blasted through things really quickly. Appreciate everyone bearing with me here. We're going to move into a short demonstration of WebGrants, which is our online application portal. It's a little bit clunky, so for folks that maybe haven't used it before, haven't used it in a long time, definitely recommend checking it out, spending some time in there if you can. And then we also have on our website lots of different guides for how to use WebGrants. There's screenshots, all kinds of stuff. And then Diana is always usually available to do walkthroughs with you. She's sort of our WebGrants expert, is in the system every day, but I use it a fair bit too, and I'm happy to help folks troubleshoot as needed. So I'm going to pull up WebGrants and do a short demo. All right, everyone should be able to see my WebGrants screen, but if you can't see it, if someone could just give me a shout and unmute, otherwise I'll assume everyone's seeing it as I am. Great. Okay, so I'm logged in as a test account. So this will look mostly like what yours would look like when you log in. I'm actually going to go to the home page first so you can see what it looks like. This is the web address up here. It's linked from the Working Lands website and any of our grant pages, and then also from the Agency of Agriculture website. So for folks that already have a user ID, you can sign in here. If you don't remember your user ID or your password, you can use these options. If you don't have an account yet, you can register using the yellow button. They have to be manually approved by one of our staff, so we recommend folks allow 1 to 2 days. Even if you don't end up applying but think you might, definitely recommend just registering for an account so you have it handy. And then there's some information here about what that process looks like. So you want to be checking your email to make sure that you can get your user ID and your password once you register. So I'm going to go ahead and log in with the test account. That will look pretty similar to what it looks like for you all. So this is the home page. Here, I think once you create your application, you would see it here when the deadline is approaching. And then I don't think you would need to do too much with the information down here. And then on the side is where you want to be sort of focusing your attention. If you go to the My Profile, I believe that's where you can sort of update some of your information. For example, if your phone or address changes or you want to do that, or if you would like to reset your password. If you know your password but just want to change it, you can log in and reset it there.
contract?
So I'm going to pretend that I'm going to create an application for the supply chain impact grant. So to do that, I'm going to go over to where it says funding opportunities on the side.
You okay?
Yep. And you'll see, you won't see these ones that are in red here, but you'll see all these ones that are posted. So we have some other opportunities posted through other grant programs. And I'm going to look here and I see here is the supply chain impact grant. I see that it was posted on Friday, that the pre-application is due on the 19th at 11:59 p.m. and the final app will be due on the 25th of March at that time. So I'll click on this. And I'm here and I'll see all these in details, again, some of the same information about the program. Here's the description. It's the same description that's on our website. So you can read through. Here are the key dates, again, copied from our website and copied from the RFA. So if you would like to read through the requests for applications, which again is the sort of key document I mentioned, it's linked on our website, and then you can also find it here. So this is what it looks like. It's long, but I do recommend reading through all of it. It has kind of all of the information that you need. So that's here if you ever need to find it handy. And we have some additional links here. This is our main website. Here's resources, which I think are also all listed here. So we have a web grants application guide, which sort of walks you through what I'm about to walk you through, with screenshots of sort of like how to find the application and create yours and complete it. And then there's some specific information that I think would only apply to the final application about creating a business plan, doing your goals and outcomes section. And then this is a specific grant page for this grant. So I've read through that and I feel ready to start. So I click this green Start New Application button. I'm going to call it test. It'd be great if you could call it something that sort of summarizes what your project is. So if you were like new refrigeration, something like that. And then you can save it. And for some reason it has you save it again to make sure that you submitted the right title. So the system can be a little clunky like that. You sort of sometimes have to do things multiple times that you think you already did. If you have other people from your business that are also registered in web grants and are going to be helping with the application, you would be able to see them here. And if you want them to also have access to it, you can add them here. And then if you decide later that you want someone to be added, I believe that you can contact Diana for that information, or she can then add them to it after the fact. So now I just sort of created the application and now I'm ready to begin. And so this preview, this is my handy dandy grant components menu. So these are the 4 sections that I mentioned that you have to complete. So this general information, it's already done. We created it. So you'll have to do the applicant information, project information, business information, and then budget and narrative. You'll see this giant red error message sort of as soon as you get here. That can be a little alarming. It's telling you it can't be submitted. That's just saying that it's not done yet. So it knows that you haven't completed everything. So it doesn't give you an option to submit, but you don't need to be alarmed by that. It means you can still work on it. You just can't submit everything because you haven't done it yet. So if I wanted to fill out this applicant information, again, as I said, this is information that we ask everybody, so some of it might not apply to you, and is optional. So you would go ahead and do that. So I could fill this out and you can save it. You'll see that some of them are required and I haven't filled those out yet. So if I had filled them out, I can go to this handy mark as complete. Right now it's not letting me mark it as complete because I haven't filled everything out. So it's definitely important to look out for everything that's in red or has that asterisk, because that's something you have to do and you won't be able to do the mark as complete until you fill it out. And it's a little frustrating because sometimes it doesn't tell you exactly what it is you haven't completed. So just look out for anything that's red and has that asterisk. Or if you're filling out your budget table, make sure that there's certain things that you might need to put an NA if that's a blank line. Otherwise, it won't let you save the form. But if I had filled it out, I'd be able to mark it as complete. And then I can move on to the next sections. And as I completed all of them, there'd be a little green check mark here. And once I have all of my green check marks, this error message will go away. It'll say green and it'll be like, you've done it. You can submit, and then there'll be a nice big green button that says submit application. And you can do that at that time. So once you submit your application, it is submitted and you cannot edit it anymore. If it is well before the deadline and you think of something that you want to change, you can contact us and we can see if it's possible to reopen it for you. But otherwise, please make sure that you're all done once you submit it. And then also please make sure that you have actually submitted it and you haven't just marked everything as complete. So once it's submitted, you'll see that this status up here will change from editing to a nice green submitted. So you want to make sure that that's where it is before the deadline, because if you sort of save all of it and you have it all done, but it doesn't get submitted, we won't see it in our queue of applications to review when we won't review it. And you'll see that the due date is the 19th at 11:59 p.m. That is a hard deadline, so please plan ahead. I believe that's a Monday. Our staff are available during business hours, Monday through Friday, 7:45 to 4:30 roughly. We're happy to help you, happy to walk you through things. We cannot all be available on that Monday, especially after hours to help you. So please plan ahead as much as possible so that if there are any sort of last minute issues, we can address them ahead of the deadline. The system will not let you submit anything after that, even if it's midnight on January 20th. You will be cut off. You can edit your application, but you can't submit it. So definitely please make sure that you get things in ahead of time. If you run into, like, if your power is out or you have like a kind of extreme emergency on that day, let us know and we can try to work with you on that. But for the most part, there are no late submissions accepted. So that's the quick overview of web grants. Again, there are those documents available with screenshots. Diana's available to help you. I can help you as best I can. She knows more about the system, and has permissions that I don't, but for the most part, I can also help with some basic questions. So we're almost done my presentation, and let me just pull up the slides, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. All right, so I believe I have the PowerPoint slides back up, and if anyone's not seeing them, please speak up. Otherwise, I will assume everyone's seeing them. So we have a lot of different resources available for you all. We have a frequently asked questions page on our website that you can refer to. There is a weekly newsletter that goes out through our agency. It goes out on Sunday nights. You can sign up for that. They always have other grant announcements in there. Workshops, free or low-cost resources for businesses. You can check out the Agency of Ag Funding Opportunities calendar. On our website, we have a list of different business planning resources along with a business development directory if you're looking for service providers for different needs, whether that's business planning, marketing, if you're having trouble with that, or if you have other questions or want to be connected to services, you can also reach out to me and I will do my best. And we also have social media on Facebook and Instagram where you can follow us, and we try to do application reminders and grant updates, as well as stories about grant projects for you to get an idea of what kinds of things have been funded. So some final tips, as I mentioned, starting early is great. Not all of these pieces apply to every application, but like I said, sometimes it's hard to get support right before the deadline, so starting early as much as possible. If you have partners that you're working with, setting up meetings with them, getting connected, making sure everyone's on the same page, registering in web grants. If you have other folks, multiple people from your business or other partners working on the project, everyone should still have their own account. And as I showed you, they can be added and everyone can work individually on it. Reading that full request for applications, that long document that I showed you all. The web grants application guide is similar to the walkthrough that I just did, has the screenshots. Some folks might prefer to draft any of their answers to application questions in a separate document and then copy them into web grants. That's totally fine. It's whatever works for you. Just make sure you allow enough time to do that copying over. That's what you plan to do. And yeah, you're welcome anytime to set up a one-on-one call with program staff. that would be me. And I can connect you to the rest of our staff as needed, or if you have a very specific web grants question, Diana would be your contact for that. But if you're in doubt of who to reach out to, you can reach out to me and I'll make sure that you get connected to the right person. Great. So that was the very, very fast overview of these grants. Thank you for bearing with me through that and listening. I'm going to stop the share and the recording so that folks can ask questions, so we won't record the Q&A portion.